walk into a room and instantly absorb the tension. They feel the anxiety before a word is spoken. They carry other people's pain like it's their own. And strangely, many of these people seem to age differently. Not slower in a magical sense, but differently. Their faces often carry depth instead of hardness. Their eyes stay emotionally alert. Their nervous systems become either incredibly resilient or dangerously exhausted. And science is beginning to reveal why. This is the hidden psychology behind why empaths age differently. Most people think aging begins in the skin. Wrong. Aging begins in the nervous system. Your biological age is deeply connected to stress hormones, inflammation, emotional regulation, sleep quality, and how your brain processes threat. And empaths process threat differently than almost everyone else. Studies in neuroscience show that highly empathetic people often have stronger activity in mirror neuron systems, the brain networks responsible for emotional resonance and social awareness. These people don't just observe emotions. They internally simulate them. That means when someone around them suffers, the empath's body partially experiences that suffering too. And this creates a paradox. Empaths can either age beautifully or rapidly. There is almost no middle ground, because emotional absorption changes the chemistry of the body. Chronic emotional stress increases cortisol. Elevated cortisol damages collagen, disrupts sleep cycles, weakens immune function, and accelerates cellular aging. Researchers studying telomeres, the protective caps on DNA, linked to aging, discovered that chronic psychological stress can literally shorten lifespan markers. Translation: your emotions become biology, and empaths live inside emotion almost constantly. But here's where it gets fascinating. Not all stress destroys people equally. Psychologists discovered something called stress perception. Two people can experience identical emotional intensity, but the person who finds meaning, purpose, and emotional control suffers far less biological damage. This is why mature empaths often age differently than wounded empaths. A wounded empath absorbs chaos. A mature empath filters it. That distinction changes everything. Young empaths usually try to save everyone. They become emotional firefighters. They enter toxic relationships. They overgive. They ignore exhaustion. They suppress boundaries because they fear rejection. And the body keeps score. The nervous system stays hypervigilant. The jaw tightens. The gut inflames. Sleep weakens. Stress hormones remain elevated. Most people think aging begins in the mirror. They think it starts with wrinkles, gray hair, tired eyes. But science tells a far darker story. Aging begins deep inside the nervous system long before the face ever shows it. And for empaths, that process works differently. Because empaths don't just experience their own emotions. They absorb the emotional atmosphere around them like a human antenna. And the human body was never designed to carry that much emotional electricity every single day. Neuroscientists have discovered that highly empathetic individuals often show increased activity in mirror neuron systems, the networks in the brain responsible for emotional imitation and social perception. In simple terms, when someone near an empath suffers, the empath's brain partially reacts as if the suffering is happening to them personally. Their nervous system doesn't fully distinguish between observed pain and expected, experienced pain. Imagine what that does over years, over decades. Imagine carrying invisible emotional weight every time you enter a room. Most people recover from stress after the moment passes. Empaths often relive it internally for hours, sometimes days, and the body keeps score with terrifying precision. Research on chronic stress shows that emotional overload increases cortisol, the body's primary stress hormone. Small doses of cortisol help survival. But long-term elevation becomes biological poison. High cortisol damages collagen, weakens immunity, disrupts digestion, accelerates inflammation, destroys sleep quality, and slowly changes the architecture of the brain itself. One Harvard-linked study found that chronic stress can actually shrink areas of the brain associated with memory and emotional regulation. Think about that. Some people are literally aging their brains through emotional exhaustion. Now imagine the empath, the person who notices every shift in tone, every fake smile, every hidden tension, every unspoken sadness. Their nervous system rarely turns off completely. and that constant vigilance silently drains the body. Scientists studying biological aging discovered something even more disturbing. People exposed to prolonged emotional stress often show shortened telomeres, the protective caps at the ends of DNA, linked to cellular aging and lifespan. Shorter telomeres are associated with earlier disease, faster aging, and reduced resilience. Translation? Emotional stress can reach all the way into your cells. Your heartbreak becomes chemistry. Your anxiety becomes biology. Your emotional environment becomes physical reality. And empaths live inside emotional environments more intensely than almost anyone else. That's why so many empaths feel exhausted in ways doctors sometimes struggle to explain, because the fatigue isn't only physical, it's neurological. Their nervous system is processing more emotional information than the average person every single day. Some psychologists compare highly sensitive individuals to computers with too many tabs open at once. The system overheats, not because it's weak, because it's processing too much simultaneously. And this creates one of the greatest hidden dangers for empaths: silent stress accumulation. The kind that doesn't explode immediately. The kind that slowly damages the body while nobody notices. The empath smiles, keeps helping, keeps listening, keeps absorbing. But internally, the nervous system is screaming for recovery. This is why many empaths experience mysterious symptoms during emotionally toxic periods of life: chronic fatigue, brain fog, digestive problems, insomnia, muscle tension, autoimmune flare-ups, panic attacks, skin inflammation. And what's terrifying is that modern science increasingly confirms the connection between emotional stress and physical disease. Researchers in psychoneuroimmunology, the science of how emotions affect immunity, discovered that prolonged psychological stress weakens immune defense and increases inflammatory activity throughout the body. Inflammation is now linked to nearly every major aging-related condition on Earth: heart disease, diabetes, cognitive decline, depression, even accelerated skin aging. The body cannot separate emotional survival from physical survival. To the nervous system, emotional danger is still danger. That's why empaths often age differently depending on the people around them. Put an empath in chaos and watch their body deteriorate. Put the same empath in emotional safety and watch them transform, because safety changes biology. When the nervous system feels safe, cortisol drops, sleep improves, cellular repair increases, digestion stabilizes, hormones rebalance. Even facial tension softens. Scientists found that chronic stress affects facial aging so strongly that prolonged emotional strain can visibly alter appearance over time. The face becomes a map of the nervous system. That's why some people look emotionally exhausted long before old age arrives, and others seem strangely youthful despite difficult lives. The difference is not always genetics. Sometimes it's an emotional burden. Now here's where this becomes truly fascinating. Not all empaths age badly. In fact, some age extraordinarily well. Why? Because awareness can eventually become protection. Young empaths often absorb emotions unconsciously. They take responsibility for everyone's pain. They overextend themselves. They confuse self-sacrifice with love. And their nervous system pays the price. But older, emotionally intelligent empaths begin learning something powerful: boundaries. And boundaries may be one of the most biologically protective skills on Earth. Studies show that people with strong emotional regulation experience lower inflammatory responses under stress. Their bodies recover faster. Their nervous systems return to baseline quicker. They don't stay trapped in survival mode as long. This changes aging dramatically. The mature empath eventually realizes something life-changing. Not every emotion in the room belongs to them. That realization alone can save years of biological wear, because many empaths spend half their lives carrying emotional energy that was never theirs to carry. Family trauma, relationship chaos, other people's insecurity, other people's anger, other people's pain. The nervous system absorbs all of it until the body finally begins breaking under the pressure. But once an empath learns emotional filtering, everything changes. They still care deeply, but they stop emotionally bleeding for everyone they meet. And that creates nervous system recovery for the first time in years. Some empaths describe this moment like finally putting down invisible weight they didn't realize they were carrying. Suddenly, they sleep deeper, think clearer, feel light. Day AR, look healthier, because healing begins the moment the nervous system no longer feels trapped in constant emotional threat. And this may be the greatest secret about why empaths age differently. Their aging is directly tied to emotional exposure. The people around them matter more. The environments matter more. The stress matters more. The peace matters more. An empath in a toxic relationship can age rapidly. An empath in a healthy environment can almost appear reborn, because their biology is deeply connected to emotional atmosphere. And most people never realize how much their environment is shaping their body until the damage is already visible. But the empath eventually learns. Every conversation affects chemistry. Every relationship affects the nervous system. Every unresolved emotional wound leaves fingerprints on the body, which means the greatest anti-aging decision an empath can make is not cosmetic. It's emotional. Protect the nervous system. Protect the peace. Protect the emotional environment. Because the body listens to every emotion the mind experiences. And for empaths, the body is always listening louder than anyone realizes. There is a moment, in every empath's life when their body begins to betray them. Not suddenly, silently. The exhaustion becomes heavier. The sleep stops feeling restorative. The chest tightens for no reason. The mind races at night, replaying conversations that other people forgot hours ago. And eventually the empath realizes something terrifying. They are dying emotionally from wounds they never created. Because most empaths were never taught boundaries. They were taught guilt, taught obedience, taught to keep the peace, taught to absorb pain quietly so everyone else could remain comfortable. And the nervous system pays for that conditioning with brutal precision. Science now confirms that chronic emotional stress changes the body at a cellular level. Researchers studying trauma and emotional overload discovered that prolonged stress exposure keeps the nervous system trapped in a state of hypervigilance, a constant subconscious expectation of danger. The body cannot heal properly in survival mode. Digestion weakens. Hormones destabilize. Inflammation rises. Immune defenses drop. Sleep becomes fragmented. And one of the most frightening discoveries in neuroscience is this: we brain adapts to emotional chaos the same way soldiers adapt to war zones. Over time, the nervous system becomes addicted to scanning for danger. This is exactly why wounded empaths struggle to relax even in peaceful environments. Their body has forgotten what safety feels like, and many don't even realize it's happening. Because wounded empaths often look functional from the outside. They smile, work, help others, give advice, listen endlessly. But internally, they are emotionally hemorrhaging energy every single day. Psychologists sometimes call this pathological self-sacrifice, the compulsive habit of abandoning your own emotional needs to regulate other people's emotions. And the consequences are devastating. One study on chronic caregivers found elevated stress hormones, weakened immune response, and significantly higher risks of burnout-related illness. Think about that. The human body literally deteriorates faster when forced to carry nonstop emotional responsibility. Now imagine the empath who has spent decades rescuing emotionally unstable people. The nervous system begins adapting to chaos as normal, and this creates the empath's most dangerous illusion. Scion, if I give enough love, I can finally create peace. But trauma does not reward overgiving. It consumes it. That's why wounded empaths attract manipulators so often. Narcissists, emotional vampires, controllers, people who sense kindness and mistake it for unlimited access. And science explains why this dynamic becomes so addictive. Toxic relationships create intermittent reinforcement, unpredictable cycles of affection and rejection that trigger powerful dopamine responses in the brain. The same neurological mechanisms involved in gambling addiction become activated in unstable emotional relationships. The empath keeps chasing emotional resolution, keeps hoping the next conversation will finally bring peace, keeps sacrificing themselves trying to fix people who do not want healing. Meanwhile, the nervous system slowly collapses under the pressure. Researchers discovered that emotional rejection activates many of the same brain regions involved in physical pain. To the brain, heartbreak is not metaphorical. It is a neurological injury. And wounded empaths experience these injuries repeatedly because they stay connected to people long after the relationship becomes psychologically destructive. Why? Because boundaries feel terrifying to someone conditioned to earn love through self-abandonment. So the empath tolerates behavior that slowly destroys them. Disrespect, manipulation, emotional inconsistency, gaslighting, constant criticism, and each toxic interaction leaves physiological residue inside the body. Stress hormones surge, inflammation rises, muscles tense, breathing patterns change. Even the cardiovascular system suffers. One major study found that toxic relationship stress significantly increases risks of heart disease and long-term health complications. Your relationships literally affect your lifespan. But then something extraordinary begins happening when an empath finally learns boundaries. The nervous system starts recovering, not overnight, but biologically. Sleep deepens, cortisol lowers, mental clarity returns, energy stabilizes. And for the first time in years, the body no longer feels trapped in emotional warfare. Because boundaries are not psychological walls, they are nervous system protection. And this is where wounded empaths transform into mature empaths. The wounded empath absorbs everything. The mature empath filters. That single difference changes the entire body. The mature empath eventually understands something painful. Compassion without boundaries becomes self-destruction. And neuroscience supports this distinction. Studies on emotional regulation show that people who maintain healthy interpersonal boundaries recover from stress significantly faster than people trapped in chronic emotional enmeshment. The body heals when emotional overload stops. But many empaths resist this transformation for one heartbreaking reason. They confuse boundaries with cruelty. They fear disappointing people, fear abandonment, fear being misunderstood. So they continue overextending themselves until their body forces a shutdown. Panic attacks, burnout, autoimmune symptoms, chronic fatigue, emotional numbness. The nervous system eventually says what the mouth refused to say for years. Enough. And that breaking point becomes the beginning of rebirth for many empaths. Because pain forces awareness. The empath finally notices how certain people affect their body. One conversation ruins their peace for hours. One toxic family gathering drains their RGY completely. One manipulative text message triggers anxiety instantly. The body reveals the truth before the mind accepts it. And once the empath starts listening to their nervous system, their entire life changes. They stop chasing emotionally unavailable people. Stop explaining themselves endlessly. Stop rescuing adults who refuse accountability. Stop carrying emotional burdens that were never theirs. And what happens next shocks them. Their body begins healing faster than expected, because the nervous system was never broken. It was overloaded. There's a reason emotionally healthy people often appear calmer, younger, and more physically vibrant. Their nervous system spends less time preparing for emotional attack. That conservation of biological energy matters enormously over decades. Every unnecessary conflict costs chemistry. Every toxic relationship costs biology. Every suppressed emotion costs the nervous system energy it can never fully recover, which is why mature empaths become extremely selective with access to their emotional world, not because they stopped caring, because they finally understood the price of caring without limits. And this is the empath's greatest evolution, not becoming cold, not becoming detached from humanity, but learning the difference between empathy and emotional self-destruction. The mature empath can sit beside pain without drowning inside it, can love without abandoning themselves, can help without carrying another person's soul on their back. And something incredible happens when this shift occurs. Their presence changes. The anxiety in their eyes fades. Their voice becomes calmer. Their body softens. Even their face changes. Because peace leaves physical evidence too. The nervous system finally exits survival mode. And when survival mode ends, healing begins. This is why boundaries are not selfish. They are biological survival. They protect the brain, protect the heart, protect the immune system, protect the soul hiding inside the nervous system. And the empaths who age the best eventually learn one life-altering truth. You are not required to destroy yourself in order to prove you love people, because the moment an empath stops bleeding emotionally for everyone around them, their body finally has a chance to live instead of merely survive. There is something strange about out older empaths. They do not always become harder with age. They become sharper, calmer, more unreadable. As if life burned away their illusions but somehow strengthened their perception. And science is beginning to explain why. Most people think emotional people grow weaker over time. The opposite is often true. Highly empathetic individuals who survive emotional hardship frequently develop extraordinary pattern recognition abilities, the brain's capacity to detect subtle human behavior before conscious awareness even catches up. They notice the pause before deception, the forced smile hiding resentment, the emotional inconsistency in someone's voice. The nervous system of an empath becomes trained through years of emotional exposure, and eventually their intuition stops feeling mystical. It becomes neurological intelligence. Researchers studying emotional intelligence discovered that people with high emotional awareness often show stronger activity in brain regions associated with social processing, empathy, and threat detection. Their brains become highly adapted to reading emotional environments quickly. But this ability is usually born through pain, not the comfort. Young empaths often trust too easily. They see potential instead of patterns. They ignore red flags because they project their own sincerity onto others. And that innocence costs them dearly. Manipulation teaches them vigilance. Betrayal teaches them observation. Emotional exhaustion teaches them restraint. Over time, the empath's brain begins cataloging human behavior with terrifying accuracy. They stop listening only to words. They start reading energy shifts, micro-expressions, tone changes, body language, inconsistencies. And neuroscience confirms that the human brain can detect emotional signals milliseconds before conscious thought fully processes them. Your nervous system notices danger before your logic catches up. That gut feeling many empaths describe is often rapid subconscious pattern recognition operating beneath awareness. The older empath learns to trust it, and that changes everything. Because emotional intelligence is not simply kindness, it is prediction. The ability to recognize human behavior before it fully reveals itself. And this ability becomes stronger with age when the empath stops ignoring their own instincts. That's why mature empaths rarely panic the way they once did. They've seen the patterns before, they know how manipulation sounds, know how emotional instability behaves, know how fake affection feels. Experience gives their empathy structure, and structure protects the nervous system. One of the most dangerous traits of young empaths is emotional overexposure. They attach too quickly, reveal too much, care too deeply before trust is earned. But after years of emotional injury, something fascinating happens psychologically. The empath stops needing external validation as intensely. And research shows that reduced validation-seeking behavior is strongly associated with improved emotional regulation and lower stress reactivity. Translation? The less desperate you are for approval, the healthier your nervous system becomes. Older empaths begin realizing that peace is more valuable than attention. And this realization conserves enormous emotional energy. Because emotional intelligence is not about feeling everything endlessly. It is about knowing which emotions deserve access to your inner world. Most people never learn this. They remain emotionally reactive their entire life. Bees. Every criticism destabilizes them. Every rejection consumes them. Every conflict becomes identity-threatening. But mature empaths evolve differently. They become emotionally observant instead of emotionally absorbent. That distinction may save their mental and physical health. Psychologists studying resilience discovered that emotionally self-aware individuals recover from stress faster because they can process emotional experiences without becoming fully consumed by them. This is emotional mastery, not emotional numbness, and there's a major difference. Numb people disconnect from feelings. Wise empaths feel deeply without losing control of themselves. That balance changes aging, because chronic emotional chaos accelerates biological wear on the body, but emotional regulation protects it. The mature empath eventually understands that emotional energy is finite, and they stop wasting it on people committed to misunderstanding them. This is why older empaths often become quieter, not weaker, more selective. Silence becomes filtration. They no longer explain themselves endlessly because experience taught them something painful. People rarely misunderstand why. Or accidentally, most of the time they understand perfectly. They simply benefit from pretending not to. That realization transforms the empath's relationships permanently. And science supports why this transformation matters. Researchers found that emotionally draining social interactions significantly increase cortisol and inflammatory responses in the body. Toxic social environments literally exhaust human biology. The mature empath stops volunteering for unnecessary suffering, not because they stopped loving humanity, because they finally learned self-preservation. And here's where emotional intelligence becomes almost supernatural. Older empaths become highly skilled at emotional forecasting. They can sense instability early, recognize manipulation before it escalates, notice emotional danger before the relationship fully forms. Their brain becomes a prediction engine built from survival, and survival rewires perception. Studies on trauma adaptation show that repeated emotional experiences strengthen neural pathways associated with rapid pattern detection. The brain learns from emotional pain with brutal efficiency. This is why many older empaths can walk into a room and instantly identify tension others completely miss. Their nervous system has been trained by years of emotional observation. But unlike wounded empaths, mature empaths no longer internalize everything they detect. That is the critical difference. The young empath feels responsible for fixing every emotional disturbance. The mature empath simply observes it. And observation without emotional absorption protects the body from chronic stress overload. This is why emotionally intelligent people often appear calmer under pressure. Their nervous system no longer reacts impulsively to every emotional trigger. They pause, assess, filter, respond strategically. And neuroscience shows that this pause is incredibly important. The ability to regulate emotional impulses is linked to stronger activity in the prefrontal cortex, the brain region associated with decision-making and emotional control. In other words, emotional intelligence literally changes brain function. And the empath who develops this skill becomes psychologically powerful, because emotional control is one of the rarest forms of power in modern society. Most people are controlled by emotional reason. We CDONs they barely understand. But the mature empath studies emotion like a language, and eventually they stop drowning inside human behavior. They decode it. That's why so many older empaths seem strangely intimidating despite being deeply compassionate. They see through people quickly, too quickly. The performance no longer works on them, and manipulators sense this immediately. Because emotionally intelligent empaths stop reacting predictably. They stop chasing closure, stop begging for honesty, stop explaining their worth to emotionally unavailable people. And that emotional restraint creates enormous psychological stability. The nervous system finally experiences something rare: peace without confusion. No constant guessing, no emotional roller coasters, no obsessive need to fix broken people. And when emotional chaos decreases, the body begins redirecting energy toward healing instead of survival. Sleep improves, inflammation lowers, mental clarity sharpens. Even aging slows in visible ways because the nervous system is no longer trapped in